Imagine this. You just bought your dream home. A beautiful farmhouse with acres of land. The perfect place to raise your 5 daughters. You move in, unpack your boxes, tuck your kids into bed that first night, and then you hear footsteps in the hallway. But everyone's asleep. Then a door slams. Then another. Then you feel cold hands touch your shoulder in the dark and you realize you're not alone in this house. This isn't a horror movie. This is what happened to the Perron family in 1971. And for the next 10 years, they would share their home with ghosts. This is the true story behind The Conjuring. The real family, the real house, the real terror, and I'm warning you now, it's way scarier than the movie. Let me introduce you to the Perron family. Roger Perron, the dad, a hardworking man who wanted to give his family the best life possible. Carolyn Perron, the mom. Loving, protective, and about to become the main target of something evil. And their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. Andrea was the oldest at 14. April was the youngest at just 5 years old. In December 1970, the Perron found their perfect home. It was a gorgeous farmhouse at 1677 Round Top Road in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Just outside Providence, the house was old, built in 1736. That's almost 300 years old. It had 14 rooms, 8 acres of land, and this beautiful, peaceful energy, or so they thought. The house sat in a quiet, rural area, surrounded by trees. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, perfect for privacy. Perfect for raising kids, perfect for things to happen without anyone hearing your screams. In January 1971, the Perron family moved in. They were so excited. The girls were running through the rooms, claiming their bedrooms. Carolyn was planning where to put furniture. Roger was talking about fixing up the barn. That first night, they all went to bed exhausted but happy, and that's when it started. The first strange thing happened the very next morning. Carolyn woke up and went downstairs to make breakfast. She walked into the kitchen and stopped. There were small piles of dirt on the floor. She'd cleaned that floor spotless the night before. The doors and windows were all closed. Nobody had walked through. So where did the dirt come from? She cleaned it up. Didn't think much of it. Old house probably came from somewhere, but the next morning, more dirt in the same spot, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Then the broom started moving. Carolyn would leave it in one corner of the kitchen. She'd come back 10 minutes later and it would be across the room, leaning against a different wall. Nobody had touched it. The girls started noticing things too. Andrea, the oldest, would hear whispers in her room at night, like someone was right next to her bed talking in a language she couldn't understand. Nancy heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate footsteps. She'd look out her door. Nobody there. Christine saw shadows moving across the walls, shadows shaped like people, but when she turned on the light, nothing. And April, the youngest at 5 years old, started talking about her friend. She said there was a boy who lived in the walls. His name was Oliver Richardson. He would come out at night and play with her. But then April started knowing things she shouldn't know. Historical details about the house, names of people who had lived there decades before, things a 5-year-old couldn't possibly know. And that's when Carolyn realized their house wasn't empty when they moved in, it had a residence. As weeks turned into months, the activity got stronger. The family started seeing full apparitions, not just shadows, actual figures. The girls would see a man standing at the top of the staircase. He'd be staring at the wall like he was looking out a window. But there was no window there. Just a wall. He never looked at them, never acknowledged them, just stood there, staring. Andrea saw an elderly woman rocking in a chair in one of the bedrooms. The woman would smile at her. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was knowing, like she knew something Andrea didn't. Cindy woke up one night to see a woman hanging from a rope in the corner of her room. She screamed. Her parents came running. By the time they got there, the woman was gone. But Cindy could still smell the faint scent of decay. Roger, the dad, he didn't believe it at first. He thought his wife and daughters were just scared of living in an old house. But then he experienced it himself. One night, Roger was alone in the house. Everyone else had gone into town. He was sitting in the living room reading a book when he heard It footsteps. Coming down the stairs. Slow, deliberate. He looked up at the staircase, nobody there, but the footsteps kept coming. Step, step, step. Could hear the wood creaking under the weight of something. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Then they started walking toward him. Roger sat frozen, watching the empty air move closer to him, and then he felt it. A cold hand on his shoulder. He jumped up, grabbed his coat, and left the house. He sat in his car until his family came home. After that night, Roger never questioned what his family was experiencing, because he knew they weren't alone. But not all the spirits were passive. Some were malicious, and one in particular had her sights set on Carolyn. Carolyn started waking up with bruises, scratches, marks on her body that she couldn't explain. She'd go to bed fine, wake up with 3 long scratches down her back, or a bruise on her leg in the perfect shape of a handprint. And then she started feeling it, something touching her. In the middle of the night, cold fingers running through her hair, a weight pressing down on her chest, whispers in her ear. The whispers were always the same. Get out. The Perron started researching the history of the house, and what they found terrified them. The house had been home to multiple families over the centuries, and many of them had died there. Suicides, accidents, one family poisoned, another froze to death in the winter. But one name kept coming up over and over again: Bathsheba Sherman, Bathsheba Thayer. Sherman was born in 1812. She married Judson Sherman in 1844 and lived on a farm nearby. Local legend said she was a witch, that she practiced dark magic, that she sacrificed infants to the devil. In 1865, a baby died while in Bathsheba's care. The child's skull had been impaled with a large sewing needle. Bathsheba was accused, but there wasn't enough evidence to convict her. She died in 1885 at the age of 73. Supposedly by suicide, hanging herself from a tree on her property, and according to local legend, her spirit never left. She cursed anyone who lived on the land. Specifically, she targeted the mothers, the women of the house, because she believed the land was hers and anyone else was trespassing. Carolyn fit the description perfectly. She was the mother, the matriarch, and Bathsheba wanted her gone. By 1974, things had gotten so bad that Carolyn was terrified to be in her own home. She'd been pushed down the stairs. She'd wake up unable to breathe, like invisible hands were choking her. The youngest daughter, April, started sleepwalking and would wake up in different parts of the house with no memory of how she got there. Desperate, Carolyn reached out to paranormal investigators, and that's when Ed and Lorraine Warren entered the picture. Ed and Lorraine Warren were the most famous paranormal investigators in America. They'd investigated the Amityville horror case, the Annabelle doll case, hundreds of hauntings. Ed was a demonologist, someone who studies demons. Lorraine was a clairvoyant medium. She claimed she could see and communicate with spirits. When the Warrens arrived at the Perron house, Lorraine immediately felt it. She said the house was filled with spirits, at least 8 different entities. Some were harmless former residents, but one was evil, Bathsheba. The Warrens spent days investigating. They brought recording equipment, cameras, temperature gauges. They captured voices on tape, cold spots that shouldn't exist, doors slamming on camera with nobody near them. But the most disturbing evidence? Lorraine said she could see Bathsheba standing in the corner of Carolyn's bedroom, watching her, waiting. Ed told the Perron the truth. He said, "This entity wants your wife dead, and it won't stop until it gets what it wants." The Warrens decided to perform a seance. The idea was to communicate with Bathsheba's spirit and try to make her leave peacefully, but Roger didn't want to do it. He had a bad feeling. Carolyn, desperate for relief, insisted. So one night in 1974, the Warrens set up a seance in the living room. They brought a medium, a woman who could supposedly channel spirits. Andrea and Cindy, 2 of the daughters, hid in a nearby room to watch. The medium sat across from Carolyn. Everyone held hands. The lights were dimmed. Lorraine began speaking, trying to call out to Bathsheba's spirit. At first, nothing happened. Then, the temperature dropped. The girls watching could see their breath in the air. The medium's eyes rolled back in her head. She started speaking in a voice that wasn't hers, a deep, guttural voice, and then Carolyn started screaming. She said invisible hands were grabbing her, pulling her. She was being lifted out of her chair. Roger jumped up to grab his wife, but before he could, Carolyn was thrown across the room. Her body slammed against the wall so hard it left a dent. The Warrens rushed to her. She was unconscious, bruises already forming on her arms where something had gripped her. When she finally woke up, she looked at the Warrens and said in that same deep voice, "You will never get rid of me." Roger kicked the Warrens out that night. He told them to never come back. The seance had made things worse, and he was right. After the seance, the Perron family had a choice: move out, or learn to live with it, but they couldn't afford to move. They'd put everything they had into this house, so they stayed for 6 more years. And slowly, they adapted. The girls learned which rooms were safe and which rooms to avoid at night. They learned that the spirits were more active at 3 a.m., the witching hour. They learned not to provoke them, not to challenge them, not to use Ouija boards or seances. Andrea, the oldest daughter, started keeping a diary of everything that happened. Every sighting, every sound, every touch. Years later, she would turn those diaries into a trilogy of books called House of Darkness, House of Light. Surprisingly, some of the spirits became almost friendly. April's ghost friend, Oliver Richardson, was real. He was a boy who had died in the house in the 1800s. He never tried to hurt anyone. He just wanted to play. There was a spirit of a young woman who would appear in mirrors. She seemed sad but never harmful. And there was an elderly man who would sit in a rocking chair on the porch. The girls would sometimes see him and wave. He'd nod back, but Bathsheba, she never left. Carolyn continued to be targeted, pushed, scratched, bruised, but she learned to fight back. She would pray, burn sage, demand that Bathsheba leave her alone, and sometimes it worked. For a little while, in 1980, 9 years after moving in, the Perrons finally had enough money to leave. They sold the house and moved away, and the hauntings stopped. They never experienced paranormal activity again because it wasn't them, it was the house. So here's the wild part. That house, it's still standing. 607 Round Top Road, Harrisville, Rhode Island, and you can visit it. After the Perron left, the house changed hands several times. For years, it was just a normal private residence. But then in 2013, the movie The Conjuring came out. It was a massive hit, and suddenly, everyone wanted to see the real house. In 2019, a couple named Corey and Jennifer Heinzen bought the property. They knew the history. In fact, they wanted to embrace it. They officially renamed it The Conjuring House and opened it to the public. Now you can book tours. Day tours where you walk through the rooms and hear the stories, or, if you're brave enough, you can book an overnight investigation. That's right. You can sleep in the house for about $1,000 to $1,500 a night, and people do it. Paranormal investigators, YouTubers, ghost hunters, Sam and Colby, huge YouTubers, stayed there for a week in 2024. They documented everything. Millions of people watched. Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures investigated it, The Twin. Paranormal team spent multiple nights there, and almost every single person who stays reports something. Doors, slamming, footsteps, voices, cold touches, shadows. In 2022, the house was sold again to a woman named Jacqueline Nunez. She paid over $1.5 million for it. She continues to run it as a paranormal investigation site. But even she admits the energy in that house is powerful, almost overwhelming. She doesn't live there full time because she can't. The Perron family, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, they're all adults now, in their 50s and 60s, and every single one of them will tell you the same thing. What happened in that house was real. They lived it. They survived it, and they'll never forget it. So why does this story still scare people over 50 years later? I think it's because it's so relatable. We all want a home, a place where we feel safe, where we can relax and be ourselves. But what if your home isn't safe? What if something else is there? Something you can't see, can't fight, can't escape. The Perron family did everything right. They were good people. They weren't messing with Ouija boards or seances. Before the hauntings started, they just moved into a house, and The house had residents who didn't want them there. This story reminds us that there are things in this world we don't understand, things that exist in places we can't fully explain, and sometimes those things don't want us around. So the next time you move into a new home, pay attention. If doors start slamming by themselves, if you hear footsteps when nobody's there, if you feel cold hands touching you in the dark, remember the Perron family. Remember 1677 Round Top Road. And maybe, just maybe, get out while you still can. That's the true story of the Conjuring House 5 daughters. 10 years, countless ghosts, and a spirit that refused to let go. If you want more true paranormal stories like this, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon, and leave a comment telling me, would you spend a night in the Conjuring House? Would you be brave enough? The house is real. The address is real. You can visit it today, but before you book that ticket, ask yourself one question. Are you ready to meet what's waiting for you there? Thanks for watching. Stay safe and remember, some houses remember everything.